and just to welcome the Minister to the House and to welcome this legislation, and to say that in an era, I suppose, where members of the public only ever see politics in an adversarial way, and the over and back and the criticism and the bun fight and the drama and the theatre, I think that deputies in this House on both sides should be very proud of tonight's proceedings. We have a very progressive piece of legislation from Sinn Féin in the names of Louise O'Reilly and Mary Lou MacDonald, which has been, I think, was first moved a year ago. It comes to the House today for a second reading, and the Minister gave a very generous response to the piece of legislation and has gotten sanction from the Cabinet to move on the measures within the bill. There may be a small level of disagreement as to how best to proceed, but I think this is exactly how politics works best, when government shows a level of generosity towards a piece of legislation from the opposition. And I know Minister McEntee is working very well with my own colleague Brendan Howland in relation to the harassment, harmful communications and related offences bill. It's something that, collaboratively we can work together to improve the lives of the people who sent us here to work for them. Minister, I just want to refer to a study that is quite recent, issued on the 25th of November from Women's Aid, which has a national survey which shows, I suppose, gives a picture of how serious the issue is that has already been outlined by many deputies this evening. The findings, these are the words of Sarah Benson, the findings of the national survey show that we have particularly alarming levels of intimate relationship abuse experienced by young women in this country. 1/5 of young women said they experienced abuse, which included emotional abuse, physical abuse and sexual assault, stalking and harassment. Based on our 2016 CSO data, this is as many as 44,540 young women, 18 to 25, which is shocking. Even more troubling is the fact that 51% of young women who had suffered abuse said it had begun before their 18th birthday, with just 18 years old being the average age at which the abuse began. Now, often when an opposition spokesperson stands up, they speak of lack of movement from government parties on this issue, but that cannot be said in this regard, because the Domestic Violence Act, I think, of 2018 has been proven to be quite successful. There isn't really a call, from what I can hear from those agencies I've spoken to and people involved in this sector, that it's not a legislative gaps that are being asked to fill this piece of legislation aside, but there's issues within the system, the court system. Court issues remain. The fact that in family law courts there can often be a different judge that presides over a particular issue, and funding and resources can be patchy from county to county. I think you'd appreciate that, Minister. So I think there's a potential there for us to work better. I would make this point, I suppose, about where this issue comes from, because this is an issue of power, and it's an issue. It is a gendered issue, but I think it's fair to say that men are the problem here, or the majority of the problem. And I listened with great interest to what Deputy Cara McNeill had to say about the cultural background to this, and she mentioned, how it can feel to drop your children to school and to hope that there would be some element of education within the school building that could challenge this type of dynamic, that could challenge this type of power imbalance. And I would say to you, Minister, and I say this in a constructive way, because all of us have to challenge some of the norms that we have inherited in this country and to see if they stand up to scrutiny. Now, I have touched upon this issue before. There doesn't seem to be a huge appetite to change what I'm about to speak to, but I think if we are serious about eliminating all the elements in our society that lead to gender inequality and lead to situations where there can be a warped sense of power, and particularly within men, which is not something that's confined to history. Anybody who speaks on an issue that affects predominantly women will be contacted with people by mainly men of all generations who have a warped sense of their role in society. But we have a disproportionate number of schools in Ireland, Minister, which are segregated on gender basis. And there's 17% of Irish primary school children attend single-gender primary schools. It's not a huge amount, but it's completely out of kilter with the European norm. And 1/3 of our second-level schools are single-gender. Now, you cannot convince me, or nobody can convince me, that that isn't part of the problem, that we separate children on the basis of their gender in the education system, disproportionately. Now, not since 1998 have the department given sanction to a new single-gender school. It's not the department's policy to give any new school that status, and that's, you know, more than 20 years ago. But we still have a huge number of our young people, one third of them, attend second-level schools which are either all male or all female. Now, what people will say to me when they try to defend the system is that girls do better in all-girls settings, or that at least is the accepted, passed-down understanding of why they should be supported. And I think that assumption is open to challenge. Because what happens in an all-male or all-female second-level school setting is that you cannot challenge these issues of domestic violence, of power, of sexual assault, of image-based sexual assault amongst young people if they're being taught in two different buildings, if they're not learning in the same space. And there can be a toxic masculinity that grows up in a single-gender male school. And I'm not in any way suggesting that every school is like this, or that it isn't called out in second-level all-male schools, or that there isn't huge efforts being made in all our education facilities in order to stamp out this type of toxic viewpoint or attitude. But, you know, in progressive countries in Europe and around the world, the idea of unquestioningly pursuing this accepted norm of separating children on the basis of gender, it just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And it leads to a society that views that is very gendered and views the other gender with a slight level of, shall I say, curiosity or insecurity, and a lack of ability to interact properly. And then within that can come a situation where power is sought and dominance is sought. And if you have an entire school that is built around this dressing room culture of what boys say to boys and what young men say to young men, well then I think that has to be challenged. So I don't say this in order to be provocative. I don't say this in order to to be destructive. I say this because I think it is worthy of us to always drill down into the root causes of toxic masculinity, of why in Ireland this issue appears to be getting worse, why so many young women, as Women's Aid have illustrated to us, are suffering from this. And these are people born since the year 2000 who are going through this. So this is not an old phenomenon that we're still dealing with from old attitudes. So with that, I have no idea how much time I have left.
You're just under 1 minute left.
1 minute, okay. So with that, Minister, I'll repeat what I said. I think it is incredibly refreshing to be here this evening to witness what is being achieved from government and opposition together. I think it's refreshing what you, Minister, are doing with our own pieces of legislation around image-based sexual assault and the various different issues around that, and we hope it will be called Coco's Law. I think more of this is needed, but I do think it is worthy of us to better drill down into the state-sponsored segregation of genders that we have in our school system, and to challenge it and to try and find ways to overcome it.
Thank you.
Moving on to the